Welcome to the B-Sides and Beers podcast.
Welcome to B-Sides and Beers, episode 63. Tonight we're digging into the birth of hardcore, 1970s and 80s. What's going on?
Hey, man. Doing good.
Doing great.
Ready for some hardcore.
Hardcore. Let's do it. Yes.
Woo!
Let's do it hardcore. Yeah.
Let's do the hardcores.
Let's do that. Hey, don't forget to share this episode, folks. Don't forget to just spread it around and share it around and tell everybody, tell your friends. We're getting more listeners, and we want to keep it going, so share it. Please.
You tell two friends, and they tell two friends.
That's how it works.
And they tell two friends.
Yeah, it works nicely. So, Mike, I'm going to kick it off to you today for what we're drinking.
Let's do that, because I've got some treats.
Excellent.
Oh,
Yeah, so the first one I got here is from Lighthouse Brewing, and it is a limited edition strawberry rhubarb ale, 5.5%. Never had it before. Just open it up, and the can being 3 feet away from my face, you can smell the strawberry rhubarb. It's kick ass.
Nice. Can I see that can?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Cool.
so is it sour or
got like a-
is it?
I don't know. I'll tell you
okay.
right now. It is not sour, and it is fantastic.
So it's sweet.
It's kind of sweet. Yeah, it's just like strawberry rhubarb pie without the pie.
Nice.
Sounds good.
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely going to buy some more of that before the limited edition
Oh, it's
goes
limited,
away.
man. It's limited.
That's what it says. It's like a collector. And the other one I got is from Phillips Brewing, and it is Super Power Hazy Double IPA, 8%. And it's super 70s, trippy,
Yeah.
psychedelic
Sweet.
colors and font. Yeah, so that's what I got.
Fantastic. Those are two good
Yeah.
ones. Dane, what you got?
Yeah.
I just finished off a Phillips Brewing Glitter Bomb. It was pretty
Always
good.
good.
Yeah, hazy pale ale. Yeah, that one's seems to be a favorite among a lot of people. But on deck, I have a Slackwater Brewing What the Fog New England IPA with Citra and El Dorado hops.
What the fuck?
What the fuck? And 6.8% strong beer, beer forte. And yeah, this looks interesting. So Kira Winona got me some beers for Father's Day. So she got
Hey, nice.
me this one. Yeah, super stoked because it's not like falling into a rut, but I just grab the same ones usually. I don't like being disappointed. but this is nice. And then I got another one from Bright Eye Brewing, which I've never heard of before.
Me either.
This is a Haifa project, and it is an IPA. Oh, it's Where Eagles Dare. Oh, I love that name. That's awesome. It's a Where Eagles Dare IPA. Did you guys know that was a Clint Eastwood movie?
No.
Yeah.
No.
It was on I think it was last night or early. Like I get up early in the morning with Otto these days and I'll watch stuff on AMC, and it's usually like old stuff. It's awesome. But I think I saw it
Very
last
cool.
night. It's an old Clint Eastwood movie Where Eagles Dare. It's like a World War II fighter plane movie.
Oh, nice. I've
That's
only seen like
awesome.
old, like the Western in Clint Eastwood old movies. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't really seen much of
Yeah.
anything else other than that. I should dive into that. That's
Yeah.
good name.
There you go. Anyway, Ken is nutto.
Oh, that's cool.
Very
Like a
cool.
dodo bird.
Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff going on there. So I'm super excited about that one.
Nice.
Yeah. Pass the baton on to you.
Right on. We're going.
what you got?
We're going to Fernie Brewing Company. This is kind of along the same lines as yours, Mike, a little bit, but this is the Contour Cherry Ale.
I had that, and it's great.
Okay, yes, a fresh and fruity punch. I have not tried this yet, so I'm pretty excited. Give that a go. And I don't know, man. This is like maybe up for can of the year. I like this one. This is at a Driftwood Brewing out of Victoria. This is the Crooked Coast Alt Beer. And check out this.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
So that means old beer.
this guy.
It's probably a dark beer.
Yeah, you know what? I brought up the description on it.
Centaur
Yeah,
on
just
there?
real quick. Crooked Coast. It's inspired by the original alt style beer of Dusseldorf.
Yeah,
Alt is German
Altstadt,
for-
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome over there.
Alt is German for old, and the style is a vestige of the days before lager yeast was discovered, when ales were what German brewers produced. So it's a marriage of the aromas of both German noble hops and caramel Munich malt. So it's a quintessential session beer. So that's 5%. So I love the can, and yeah, I'm pretty excited to try this one too. So, and yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Sweet, man.
We're gonna have to start doing a can of the year award.
Yeah, we're because there's been a few already that and I need to take some pictures too. It feels like I haven't sent any pictures to you guys too of some
Yeah.
brews.
Yeah.
Get that going too.
Get going.
Let's talk about hardcore. You know what? I found that there was a lot of like the same bands even that we have talked about in
Yeah.
our entire history
Definitely.
catalog of this show that came up a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is one of those topics where I've been very familiar with the majority of these bands over the last 20 years, and I've listened to it tons, and it's one of those things where I think I misplaced them in I put them in the wrong timeline, where you know that these bands were 70s, 80s, but it just felt like it was late 80s to 90s for a
Yeah.
lot of these. But when most of them come out in the late 70s, it's kind of mind-blowing how early that is and how groundbreaking that was.
Totally.
Yeah, and kind of forgot that was even going on, or maybe didn't know that was even going on. Like, obviously not at my conscious age 2 at the time, but like you kind of forget,
Right.
like you said, that when I hear some of this and then you listen to it, it's like this kind of belongs in the 90s almost. Like it kind of sounds like it could be there, right? But yeah, just a cool period.
I think it just speaks to how influential this moment was. And I mean, I shouldn't say is. I mean, it's still it's still going strong, but like super, super influential. And that was, for me, that was the interesting thing, is seeing, the bands that sort of sparked off post-hardcore and every other movement that was like, would not be here today without it. Yeah. Anyway.
How do you guys feel about genres? Because I was thinking about this too, going through here, and like I know it's like the old thing, like don't want to put my music in a genre, or like it was like the big like we don't want to sell out and say this is rock because it's not, or but like really when you boil it down, you need some type of a categorical system to keep this all together, I would think, right? Like,
Definitely.
So it just gets a little bit like unnerving a bit to me, because it's like post-hardcore and pre-hardcore and like post-punk and all this kind of like, you're like, I don't know. What are you considered? What kind of a band are you considered at this time, right? Like, so it just a little bit of a rant there. Sorry, but
Well, how many subgenres does it come under? I mean, there's the one solid genre, and then if it has 40 different subgenres, then it doesn't matter after that.
Yeah, I think with this genre, I think it really mattered though, because there was, when you take a look at a band like Minor Threat, there was a lot of rules to that band. There was like the whole, straight edge ethos don't do drugs, don't drink. I think they were vegans as well. If you are outside of this, culture, we're going to fuck you up. It was very hardcore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then DOA's list,
Oh yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. I'm like, all these bands had to start their own record labels in order to distribute because no one would touch them.
Yeah.
But the really interesting thing, and sorry, just circling back to your comment, Mike, about like a genre, like I think this was a very exclusive group of people. Like if you weren't on that list, you weren't having a place to sleep after the gig, or you didn't have a gig, or you didn't
even get in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like this genre, I think, and I agree with you. I don't like it. Sometimes I don't hear stuff that people's like, this band sounds like this crossed with this and this and this. And sometimes I just don't hear that. And it's sort of like, takes away from my interpretation of it. But like, I think this was a little bit different. This was, again, like an exclusive group of like really diligent and hardcore. I love saying that, hardcore. Groups of
well, it was so groundbreaking because you look at the original round of punk kind of died in 70, 77.
That also blows my mind.
Like it
I
was,
didn't know it was
done.
so,
I mean,
like in the 70s,
when you look
I
at
thought it was
this,
80s.
totally, and that's where that time where I had the timeline off where the Stooges, the Ramones, the Damned, Bad Boys or Dead Boys, Sex Pistols, the Clash, that sort of, and you don't know that it's like early 70s to 77, and then when you look at a lot of these hardcore punk bands that came after it, it's even like 78 they were starting to come out, 78, 79, 80, and how they all had the same influence from the first wave of punk, and how they all had the exact same idea at the exact same time at different parts of the country.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing. Yeah.
Without internet, without any of this stuff, where it's like, how do you all come up with the same idea when you're looking, East Coast has their own run of bands, West Coast has their own run, and you've got, different cities where you've got Los Angeles and all the way up to Vancouver and Seattle, and they have their own hardcore. And then you go to Washington and Boston and New York, and they have their hardcore, but it's so similar.
Yeah, and there's stuff in the middle too. There's Minneapolis, like there's things happening kind of all over the place, right? Yeah, it's amazing that went down, and it's almost like when you mentioned all those bands like Sex Pistols and Clash and everything like that, it was almost like they took that music and ramped it up even more, right? They just added more
Stripped
speed.
it down.
And just more hate and more, it was just the way it was, right? Like, and then, it just kind of morphed into that, I think, and just so cool how that came to be. But,
just fast, hard, and angry.
Yeah, and just going back, I think one of the first hardcore bands, Middle Class, maybe one of the first, and who knows, but, and then Black Flag drops their first album. I think it was days after, right?
And that's a lot of these were just days apart.
Yeah. And again,
like you looked at all those, like 82, 83, like there's so much that happened in like 80 to like 83 that is just like,
right. Like what was going on?
Yeah. Well, you got suicidal tendencies and adolescence and all of these within Bad Religion.
Oh,
80,
yeah. Yeah.
That's unreal. You look at Dead Kennedys that got, they were their own thing, and that was a huge spark and push to that level of hardcore. I mean, you look at 78 even.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
So I mean, who started it all?
From what I've read, it was Middle Class. They put out an album. It wasn't called Hardcore until DOA put out an album called
it was Hardcore
81, right?
81,
yeah. And that's
those first two or the first album that you were talking about was more of an EP.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's that's over in what, 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And then 2 days later, you've got Black Flag putting out an album that's 7 minutes, and it's the same thing, and they're on completely different pages, but it's the same music.
Right. And again, no internet. This isn't played on the radio.
No.
Yeah, just mind blowing how organic this just came, together all at once. Yeah, on opposite sides of the continent, right? So like Bad Brains, Washington D.C. First album was 77.
82, I think, was their first official. They got together in the late 70s, but 82 was their first album.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
So they're right in that mix too, though. But like, I watched a Bad Brains live at CBGB's in 1980.
So good.
Yeah.
So
insane,
good.
man. It's like there's no security, there's no fence.
Yeah.
There's this girl on the side. They're all kind of just like standing, kind of leaning on the stage. People are jumping off the stage, coming up there, jump off, no problem. Guys just rolling over, like crowd surfing everywhere. This girl's on the side of the stage. She is like belting out every single lyric, and like what Bad Brains is like, right? It's just like, blah, 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 blah. And she just knows them all, right? And it's just like it's the greatest video. It's the greatest live video, and I'm like, I just want to be there, man. I wish I was there. The good old days. What was that like? Just to jump on stage, and the band doesn't care. They don't even think about like somebody like is going to touch me, or somebody's going to push me or stab me or whatever. Man.
So that's what it's about. And
that's an interesting topic because like from what I've seen, and obviously I wasn't there, but there was all sorts of different like it was hardcore. It was classified as hardcore. But then you had like, Bad Brains, which was positive and uplifting, right? Like they came from jazz fusion. They incorporated like they were all Rastafarians. So
it was reggae in there too, right? Like that you got it all with the Bad Brains album. Yeah, you got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and then you take a look at a band like Discharge or like there's bands who are just not that positive, right? Black Flag, not that positive.
Suicidal tendencies.
So there was all sorts of like, we're talking about subgenres and maybe it really wasn't that important to split hairs back then. But there were, with Bad Brains, there was shows where people, as far as I understand, like it was a positive experience. And then there were shows like Black Flag where Henry Rollins was trying to smack you in the mouth, punch you in the tooth, right? Like if you lipped off to him, like you got to watch out. So it's interesting that there's different sort of environments or different sort of like vibes going on in all of these different shows.
Yeah, and then you go down to California and their hardcore scene where you've got the top 4 bands in that scene. They're all from specific gangs. Right. Like you look at Suicidal Tendencies. They were a gang band, and then like there's a list of them that it's just they're affiliated with this specific gang. And if you're gonna go to one of those shows, the odds of you getting stabbed with a screwdriver or like in the middle of the pit, it happens, and you go and people lose their lives just to do this, and
they wouldn't,
but they live and they breathe it, and it's all encompassing. I mean, it just takes everything. So
they banned Suicidal Tendencies from playing in LA until like the 90s,
really?
mid 90s.
In LA,
banned them in LA. I was
too
like,
much.
What?
Too much.
That's insane. I got to read you guys this quote though, real quick, because I loved it about Bad Brains, because this kind of talked about what we were talking about on that, and it said they play with such pure power and pure pace. They played like an unstoppable bulldozer with a supercharged V8 engine underneath it, and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!"
Yeah, totally,
Yep.
totally, yeah.
So, but and hey, Henry Rollins was a roadie for Bad Brains at one point too. So,
oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
I knew he was a big fan. I didn't know that.
Holland gear. So,
It's really cool too, looking at the difference between between Black Flag and that first EP or the first couple EPs to when Henry Rollins comes in, they put out their first full length. It's a different band.
Oh, yeah.
You're right.
Like it's on a complete different level.
Yeah. And I wanted to say too, just back to Bad Brains real quick. 1983, their 1983 album, the second album, it was produced by Rick Ocasek from the Cars.
Really?
Cool. Yeah, and I was like, that's awesome, man. Like, I had no idea. So, and he did a little bit of work with them later on too. And then Adam Yauch produced one of their albums too. I guess I didn't know that. So, just like I said, more of those bands that we've talked about that all come back in. Henry Rollins, Black Flag. There's more to come.
I got one for you,
Boys.
Chuck Mosley.
Go.
Chuck Mosley was in this band for like a day.
No, it was like I think it was close to a year. He did like he toured with them for within a year.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I don't know what happened there. He just kind of got kicked out, or
I think he just liked the drugs. But I mean, talk about an influential band. Talk about a band that everyone that I was listening to as a teenager listened to. It's like that cliche, like your drummer's favorite drummer kind of thing. Oh,
exactly. Well, and then comes from this, right? If we're talking about like influential African American musicians too that come from this, right? Like we're talking about like In Living Color comes out of this, like Fishbone comes out of this, right? Like, which are also two very important bands too, right? So, but it was interesting too because he said like one of the guys from Bad Brains said that like when Led Zeppelin throws a TV out the window, it's rock and roll, but when Bad Brains does it, it's like gangsters, right? Like a couple of gangsters throwing it out there, right? So it's like it's funny the double standard there. So
totally,
having the money and the label backing, and a little different,
just a bit. So, Bad Brains, for sure, good one, big one from the entire scene. What else you guys got?
Well, it's amazing how how this genre went from your first wave of punk to the next level of hardcore punk to influence complete life-changing genres like grunge. Where you've got this run of cities that goes north to south on the West Coast, and it's just this really cool melting pot, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, you got Seattle kind of right in the middle of up north. You got Vancouver. Heading down, you have Seattle, and I think sort of post hardcore, and that's where you get into sort of these subgenres that are a little more maybe, dare I say, radio friendly, but at the same time I think experimenting, right? And coming up with interesting stuff. Like I think the Dead Kennedys were already on that path to begin with. Like Jello Biafra, I love him. I think he's such an amazing musician, and what's it called when you talk to people? Public speaker? Is that what it's called?
Public speaker.
Anyway, I saw him talk at the U of A, and he was awesome, like hilarious. Yeah. So I think like there were certain hardcore bands that were thinking a little bit outside of the box, like rather, Speed and Aggression, absolutely, but there's more to it. There's political thought, and then there's reaching people. How do you do that? Changing the way that people listen to music and how they attain it, like really. And I think the Dead Kennedys were one of those bands that sort of like not trend.
They had a message.
Sorry.
They had a message, which was
I was going to say that like they almost transcended in a way, like, and I think that was Jello Biafra and sort of the ideas that he had and spoken word. That's what I was looking for. Spoken word. His spoken word stuff, right?
Talking.
That's
and
right,
stuff.
talking and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think like post hardcore is really if you think about it, some of the best music that, I mean, it could have been my age and everything else, but like there would be no Sub Pop, there'd be no Sonic Youth, there'd be no Nirvana, there'd be no Pixies, any of that
Yep.
stuff, right? Without hardcore. And it's interesting how you take something which is so stripped down and
So
niche market and simplistic, and you get this like beautiful palette of music that just sort of like sprung from it, right? So
Yeah. And then the influence of the grunge scene, where you've got all these obscure hardcore bands, well, obscure to the rest of the world for the most part, or normal music listeners, and then one day Nevermind
Yeah.
comes out and everyone knows it. Everyone. And it's selling 300,000 copies a friggin' day, and you know, and it's all based from this specific genre.
I think so. Or like to a big extent. Yeah, absolutely.
It's massive. I'm going through, I mean, revisiting a lot of these bands and their early albums. I can hear specific influence from, you know, the following generation, where it's like almost not complete, but almost like it's a very noticeable ripoff, like quote unquote ripoff, where the influence they wear it very, very, you know, hard on their sleeve.
Absolutely.
So,
and another thing that I was thinking about was like when we first started this project, it was just like, okay, let's listen to some hardcore, listen to early stuff, some more contemporary stuff. And contemporary stuff, I like the gear, the sound, the tone, like obviously, because it's like recorded in such a different way. It's completely different now, but back in the day, I don't think the emphasis was on any kind of tone, or it was just loud, fast, who fucking cares, right? And when you look at like Nirvana and some of the stuff that Kurt Cobain was doing, he recorded stuff out of a broken twin reverb, you know, and so that's where I see that like interesting link, where it was like it's more about emotion and getting it through rather than, you know, playing through a Dumble with this pedal and this guitar and this engineer making it sound this way, you know.
yeah, well, it's what you could afford, because they were all poor. What can you afford?
Yeah.
And that's why when you look at the guitar amp market and you see Sun amps, and they're going for all this money and they're rare. Well, they sound like shit, but they do.
Depends on your palate,
There's not. Well, I mean, you're going to slam a fuzz pedal in front of it anyway, and it's just going to do what it's going to do. But it takes this amp and it makes it iconic, because this is what they use. But at the time, that's all they could afford.
And I think a lot of these bands, you go back to them and you're like, when you have that sort of let's just say freedom, where you're not concerned about it sounding like the most tone-tastic album ever, and you're just digging into it as far as like the technique and the message and everything else, then it's a different experience altogether.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think one band here that if I can kind of insert, because we've been talking about Nirvana and we've been talking about even some sound of that, is Husker Du.
Oh man.
And yeah, like Husker Du is, you know, I mean, according to Nirvana, they don't exist without Husker Du, right?
Right.
Like, and you know, you listen to it, this is a very, again, different sounding band from like 1983 to like 1985, like a totally different band. And if you listen to their stuff in 1985, it almost sounds like it should have been recorded in 94.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's
Pop,
it's crunchy. It's poppy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like kind of melodic almost,
Yes.
right? Where it had like harmonies. I was like, well, this is hardcore. Like, you know,
because hardcore bands.
Yeah.
did
It's
not have
melodic
that.
hardcore.
yeah.
Yeah. Sub genre.
But I listened to like the 82 album of Husker Du and I'm like, oh, this sounds like Bad Brains. This sounds like the stuff we've been doing, right? And then I go to 85, I'm like, wow, this is totally different. But, you know, you can hear the Nirvana influences in there. For sure you can. But like you said too, Dane, there's sometimes where I'm like, sometimes I don't hear it. You know,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, some I'm like, you try to like kind of, it's like a placebo, right? Like you're like, it's in here, I got to hear
Yeah.
it, it's here, right?
It's
And then
gonna
you're
taste like pencil and oak, but
yeah,
I don't know.
that's what they tell me. I don't know, right? But yeah, I don't know. But I get it. I understand the spin-offs that come from it. But Husker Du feels like one of those bands in there that, you know, they were another post-punk band, you know, the late 80s or the early 80s there that kind of came out, and it was like them and like REM, and REM made it big and Husker Du didn't. Right? Like that was basically how it kind of went there. But, you know, and again, a band from Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's funny how they're even mentioned in the same sentence. They're just so left and right of each other as far as could be.
It's just,
but
it's
still,
easy there.
you know, under the same umbrella, right? Like,
Well, the DIY thing and the not wanting to sell out thing and the, you know, they all kind of sat in that same camp for the first, you know, 5 years of their career.
Okay, so here's my biggest epiphany out of all of this.
I just had an apostrophe.
Brilliant. So Discharge is one of the hardcore bands formed in 77. I've listened to them every now and then. Some of their newer stuff I kind of like, and some of the older stuff I like. But they are, as far as Wikipedia is concerned, they've created the D beat, like the subgenre D beat. You know what that is?
Was it them or was it GBH?
Well,
I guess they're all kind of on the same page with that.
Probably around the same time. So the D beat, and so Discharge was out of England, and to me this blew my mind, because when I think of it, so D beat is like the fast flip. You like, is there a term for it? Skate rock drum.
Oh no, that's it. It's like a Motorhead beat almost.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So let's do like one of those Netflix like documentaries where we fly from England to like San Diego.
Here's the globe and the red line that goes
exactly
from Seattle to
and it's
England.
skate rock, and not only skate rock, but like D beat, that drum beat is in, you know, all sorts of different types of metal.
It thrash without DB.
Exactly.
There'd be no thrash.
And
there'd be no Metallica. There'd be no.
It's crazy where, I mean, I think this was something that people really embraced over in the West Coast. And I think like starting, you know, obviously Southern, I think it was skate rock, and then it sort of like flourished with thrash and everything else. I mean, this was, and now we take a look at blast beats. And this is sort of within the same pedigree, right? Just faster, more tight, like, and really the drums pushing the song. Like you pay attention.
Important.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was for me, I was just like, oh, right. So GHB was also English.
GBH.
GBH.
So GBH was out of Birmingham, England. And that was 78. And then you look at the Exploited, it's this like the same pool. What's happening in 78 that's also happening, you know, across the pond. It's the same shit. And it's not like you can just upload it and send it by email. Check this out, or check what I'm doing on the, you know, like people can do now. How does that happen within, you know, 2 years or, you know, 2 days of each other?
College radio? I don't know, man. Like,
not even, man. I mean, it's bands touring their asses off, but like that's probably the only way you could do it is, you know, when you look at DOA hitting the road and playing everywhere, and you look at it, it's just, it's the amount of ground you cover and how often you hit these places.
Yeah.
So
the whole DIY mentality. But yeah, for me, that was the most surprising thing is something that, you know, hardcore seems like it was a very much a West Coast thing. East Coast, I guess, like we're talking about this phenomenon where things happen at the same time. So let's just say like an American thing. But then there's these like chaps in England, and they, you know, they came up with something revolutionary. I think, you know, D beat is maybe one of the most influential things that came out. You know, there's you can talk about like grunge and things that, you know, made it to mainstream, but like, you know, when I hear a D beat, I'm just like, fuck yeah, that's like, you know, like,
Yep.
you know,
Exactly.
that's something that's from the streets. That's something from like a band that is
It's just so raw.
ready to go, hardcore.
Yeah.
And if I could,
Yeah.
you know, sum it up like that to me is hardcore, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. Now I'm starting to think. I'm like, I said Motorhead, and I'm like, where does Motorhead fit into this? Because this is really close to
They're
the
right
same
there.
time, man.
Yeah.
And I think I'm like,
They're
I'm
right
thinking
there.
Overkill, right? Like in that, like that same beat.
Right.
Well, with
Like this is right in this time too, right? Like this is like 79, like 80.
yep.
Hello, like
Motorhead was the bridge band between punks and metal kids. I mean, they were the band where both sides could agree on. I mean, otherwise it was metalheads beating the shit out of punks and punks beating the shit out of metalheads for years and years, and they didn't party together. And then, you know, Motorhead comes out and they have a common interest. And it was an undeniable common interest.
yeah. That's another episode for another day. Total.
Or I've got
Motorhead's
something
yeah.
for you guys. Like, do you think that so we're talking about prescribed like genres, right? Do you think Motorhead was given the wrong genre? Do you think they were just one of the most they were like one of the original hardcore bands to begin with? They weren't
100%,
placed in
but
this
at the same
weird
time-
area that like people try and like
Yeah.
No. Well, the big thing is even like from the beginning to the end of Lemmy's life, it was, we are Motorhead and we play rock and
Right.
roll. That's, you know, there was never, you know, people tried to say, oh, they're heavy metal or they're thrash or they're this or that or punk or what. In his mind, we are Motorhead. We play rock and roll. We play louder and faster than, you know, anyone around us, and everybody picked up on that and just it.
So there you
everyone.
go.
So,
That just proves to me like they were pioneers, and I just think that they were
100%.
labeled incorrectly. People weren't able to label them.
totally.
So, and I think that's like almost to their detriment a little bit. I heard a quote, and it's like it was a David Bowie quote that I've never heard before, and it's like, never do something first, right?
Yeah.
What?
Because when you do, people
You will get
don't
fame out
know
of it.
how to categorize you. They don't
Yep.
know where to put you. They don't
Yep.
know how to exploit you. They don't know how to like
Mhm.
make money off you. And I think maybe they were just happy being in that gray zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally makes sense. Totally.
Because it feels like they still kind of fit into this whole mix, and we're talking about that, like, you know,
From start to finish, they're right there.
yeah.
And then I don't know. I want to go back real quick to the Nirvana angle, and we need to talk about the Germs.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about the Germs as being one of the very first. I mean, their only album came out in
I didn't know that.
'79.
I thought there was way. I
Yeah.
thought they had a couple albums at least.
No, and the reason for that was their singer killed himself
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
the day before Lennon was shot.
Yeah.
So he made this. He was talking up for the longest time that, you know, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to be a legend. I'm going to be a legend. My name will go on forever. So he does this. He dies, and then the next day John Lennon dies, and nobody hears about it. No one gives a shit, and his name is just gone.
That's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, but it's also kind of funny. It's kind of funny where you go through all the paces in your head, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna be a legend. My name's gonna live on forever, and then you do it, and the next day, the biggest name in the world for music, everyone knows John Lennon from every point of the earth, and he dies the next day, and you're your whole thing was for nothing.
I mean, he could have done it on fucking Christmas and no one would have known about it. He was in a band called the Cramps. Oh, sorry, the Germs that like, no one really knew about. But I see what you're saying. I mean, obviously he had some issues, but I didn't know they only had one album.
Yeah, neither did I.
Well, when you released your first album in '79 and your lead singer kills himself in '80, December 7th of 1980, you're done. What do you do? And then, I mean, fortunately for Pat Smear, he was able to get in somehow with Nirvana and then move his way into
that guy's had a pretty good career.
Foo Fighters.
Yeah,
and then,
talk about a great
He's
investment.
done okay.
Sorry, I don't want to sound like sadistic, but like, so how this is almost 20 years later, 15 years later, and he's got a gig with Nirvana. Did he do anything in between?
Probably. I don't know. Nothing that I could really find that was noteworthy.
Yeah,
interesting.
And it's funny too, because when Nirvana was massive and when I was was the age that it came out and I was caught up in it, I had no idea that there was a second guitar player in Nirvana for years.
I kind of did.
I just remember seeing him on Unplugged the first time, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm like, that's...
He toured with them during In Utero. And then obviously member of the Foo Fighters when he wanted to. So he's just like punk rock royalty.
Totally. I do what I want when I want
and
to
that
do
is interesting because not a lot of people understand that. But when you look at that pedigree, like Pat Smear is friggin' punk rock royalty. He went from making a 10-minute album with a band, like, not really. I mean, like you just said, like lead singer did his thing and like no one really knew about it. But like, as of recently, was with, one of the most prominent rock and roll bands ever.
Yeah.
And you think about it though, too, man, like he's had, so his lead singer killed himself, and the next lead singer kills himself, or Courtney Love kills him. And then,
all right, you guys got to let that go.
Never, ever.
He was a troubled junkie and he did it himself. Okay,
never, ever.
It's all because of Hole.
Yeah. And then he goes to the Foo Fighters. Maybe he's fucking like cursed. He's just,
and then Taylor Hawkins dies.
Well, is he the latest like formation of the Foo Fighters? Was he with them? Because he was in and out. He was there. Okay.
Yeah.
He did
not for the first two albums. I think he came in on the third, wasn't it? Third or fourth, and beyond.
I remember that weird music video with like the coronavirus like thing. He was in it. So it's like the second album, if not the first. I think he was in the first.
He's in the first, man.
Yeah, man.
He's like they're looking at the thing and they're like, I don't know you anything or whatever.
Yeah.
He's in that video.
Yeah, Grohl snatched him.
That was
sure.
Sorry. Yeah, that was. Well, I mean, without Dave Grohl, would he have a career? I don't know.
Shit, I don't know.
Because you look back at Scream with Dave Grohl before he started with Nirvana, it was, he was the drummer for Scream, which, goes hand in hand with the Germs, which is Pat Smear, which carries on to Nirvana to Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
So.
And you know what?
Gents, Pat Smear in 1980, between 1980 and 93, okay? He played in 81 with the ex-Screamers keyboardist and his sister in Twisted Roots. It was short-lived, but the band was the toast of the Hollywood punk scene. He made 2 solo albums of his own during this time, and he also had a brief stint as a member of the punk band The Adolescents.
Oh shit! Oh yeah, right,
really?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
While he was doing this, he was acting. He was in Quincy, Chips. He was in Blade Runner.
Oh yeah, he was in Chips. He was one of the background quote unquote punkers.
Renaissance
Howard the
man.
Duck. And then he also appeared as an extra in the music video for Prince and the Revolution single Raspberry Beret.
That's
sitting
awesome.
in front of the piano. So there you
I'm
go.
gonna have to check
Pat.
that out.
Oh, me too.
Wow.
I see that video now. Yeah. So he was busy between 80 and 93, and then he just got into Nirvana.
Let me take my foot out of my mouth. Shit.
He was busy.
Yeah.
Busy dude.
Can we do a little circle back, please, to suicidal tendencies?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I gotta go back to this.
Lovely. La, 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 la,
I don't know.
lovely.
I'm laughing like an elf.
And there's another connection because Dave Lombardo's. I didn't know Dave Lombardo was playing with them in like 2016 and beyond.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, he's playing with them.
Wow.
So-
I'd go see a suicidal tendencies show.
Well, yeah, I'd see Dave Lombardo anyway.
All right, I want to hear what you got, and then I got my own suicidal tendency story.
Well, I just, I mean, again, they're right there, right? Like 1983 coming out with that stuff, and Institutionalized gets like big, like this is- I'm in my room and then I saw this guy coming in. And,
I was a Pepsi. All I want was a Pepsi, mama.
Yeah. My mom came in. She said, Mike.
yeah.
And I didn't hear her.
And like lots of
You on
airplay
drugs?
on this, right? MTV.
Yeah.
It gets lots of airplay, right?
Yeah.
And like this is one of the and at the time,
It was so early, too.
yeah, like it's the best selling hardcore album at this point, right? The Institutionalized. So like this is one of the bands that like actually was making money maybe on this,
Right?
Like
Yeah.
and Psycho Michael there is just okay. And did you guys know about this Infectious Grooves?
Yes.
I did not
good,
not
man.
know about this.
Sounds familiar. What is it?
Fantastic.
What's a side project by Psycho Michael and Rob from Metallica?
Metallica, the bass player from Metallica.
And,
but he was also in Suicidal later on, I think. Maybe
I thought he was an OG
fourth
member.
album.
He was
Well, he
later
was in
on.
Suicidal for like a while.
He came in later. He came in later, but I think it was like third or fourth album
Okay,
he came in.
sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, he's in there too, and like the guy from
That's a good
the
album,
drummer
man.
from Bad Religion,
Yep.
he's in there. It's like a super group, but it's all like funky metal.
So good.
Wow.
If you like funk metal, it's unreal.
Yeah, it's different. I didn't know about it, so I checked that out on the side too. But yeah, so somebody else is in there too. I forget who was, but yeah. So go ahead, Dane. Sorry, your suicidal tendencies. I was just rambling there. I just wanted to bring them back up, but
All right.
that, man.
So this is going out to my brother from a different mother. Jose, if you're listening to this, I was in Mexico City. I think it was like 2015. And he was like, okay, we're going to a football game. I was like, okay, great. And so I show up, and he's wearing a Suicidal Tendencies hat, and the brim is like
The brim up.
like way longer than it should be.
yeah.
Yeah. And flipped up.
Yeah. And so we're going in, and he points at me and he says something in Spanish, and then I just get searched in the dude with the Suicidal Tendencies hat that like is going out like at least a foot and a half, like not a foot and a half. It's just ridiculous though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm getting searched. So anyway, I was just like, who even listens to Suicidal Tendencies anyway? Yeah. Good band, I guess. I don't know. Back in the day, I used to think they were goofs. I didn't really think of them
I
as
think they're awesome.
they were just sort of like they kind of had videos like the Beastie Boys, like back in the day.
Yeah,
It was like-
it was another one of those gang bands, right? Like that was one of those
Yeah.
ones that
Yeah.
was thought to be the gang band, but
But okay, so can I flip it and go somewhere completely different? And I think one of the most listened to hardcore bands in my like, I still listen to them right now, and I think it came from Sepultura. Like I love Sepultura. Listen to Sepultura.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
tons.
Yep.
They had this one song from the Cro-Mags. And that was my introduction to the
fucking love the
Cro-Mags.
Cro-Mags.
And to me, that is the epitome of hardcore. There you go.
Fucking Cro-Mags
Yeah,
are
man.
great.
They
man.
are dangerous. That is.
And that it's a different breed
Yeah.
when you go out to the New York scene of hardcore,
Right.
where it's a different page, man.
Yeah, this is 80s, later 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 83, I
Yeah.
think it was.
But this is like New York
And-
City too,
but-
right? Like, and we haven't really talked about New York
Totally.
City.
Right. And it's interesting
know-
that they sort of picked up later on. They like joined the party a little bit later on.
Yeah, but I mean, when they invent a style of guitar
Yeah.
that's their own with
What is that?
the
Tell me
full
about that. I don't know what
mutes,
that is.
the full palm
Palm
mutes,
mutes,
where
man.
the chug.
Oh,
with
that's
the
all-
palm
that's where they
mutes,
came
The
from?
New York chug.
That's where it
way.
started,
Didn't
and
know
that.
so 82 ish, and like to take that onto what we hear today for metal, that's where
Totally.
that's where it started,
Totally.
and it's so
Yeah.
massive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then New York hardcore with Beastie Boys starting out as a hardcore band. I've always loved that, and that's where going back to our Beastie Boys episode, where it's like why do all these albums have punk songs on them? Well, because they started off as a hardcore band
Yeah.
in New York, and then found hip hop, and then incorporated in their style.
Totally.
And you
So-
can see that Bad Brains influence in the different flavors that you get in the Beastie Boys
100%.
album, right? Like, you think about Ill Communication
100%.
and the different, you get everything from the Sambrosa to, Country Mike to whatever, right? Like, it's just like, there's a little bit of everything on there, So,
Yep.
and just like a Bad Brains album, same kind of idea. Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So good, man. So good. Yeah. So really, without hardcore, there's no proper thrash. There's no, Suicidal Tendencies was one of the first to start the thrash thing, and the Overseas that we were talking about, and Motorhead and GBH and all these other bands that fed thrash. It was the next level from the British, new wave of British metal, and to take it from an Iron Maiden to the next level of Metallica, Sepultura, Metallica, Slayer, and on.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just without hardcore, there's no thrash metal. Without hardcore, there's no grunge. Without hardcore, it's unreal. So
I have a question for you guys, and I
so
was
strong.
like thinking about this because I also wanted to talk about what's happening now with hardcore, and there seems to be like a pretty thriving,
Unreal.
Lots.
Unreal.
And it's funny, Mike, because you showed me Turnstile like a while ago. I think like you
so good.
you
So
messaged me
good.
like one of the videos, and it's like, oh, it's fine, it's kind of arty, and I never, for whatever reason, like I never got back to it. And then I saw like some of my friends posting stuff about, I think they came to Vancouver or something like that. I was like, I should check them out.
Mhm.
And I go into the mainland every month for work or whatever, and I just put them on. This is like 6 a.m. I was like, they're awesome. And like
Ding.
there was so much stuff. They took like basically all of my favorite bands, and they just like were a conduit.
Yep. Put them all together.
It is so good. And now I think like they're obviously like this discovering or exploring this sort of like post hardcore thing. Again, it's like the neo post hardcore with their new album. And it's really cool to see the sort of like the cycles, right? How things happen.
Yep.
And they're very like nitty gritty early stages, and how people get influenced. And then it sort of like comes back again, and you get these like hardcore guys. Like I remember early 2000s, probably 2003 Combat Kid. And for me, like that band, I loved Combat Kid. It was, that was hardcore for me. And I listened to that one album, Wake Up the Dead, over and over and over and over and over.
Yep.
And it wasn't really embraced, but it seems like now there is some sort of scene. It seems like, with other stuff like pop punk is kind of coming back and stuff like that, whatever. But it seems like we're just going through a resurgence of stuff, and then like new stuff comes out of it. And I think it's really nice to see, the whole spectrum of things again, like
how everything can just meld when you you look at with Turnstile, where their first two albums were
they were
hardcore,
absolutely,
and then now, like you're saying, where they have all these different layers and 80s synths and all these airy,
like heavy chorus on that guitar,
shoegaze kind of stuff, and then it hits hard with drums, and then they get these metal hardcore interludes, and the drums come in, the guitars,
and the dude sounds it's like
this Jackson V, and it's just
it's like Jane's Addiction mixed with hardcore, mixed with that chorus is just pure Nirvana, right? Like it's so awesome to see someone do it right, and to just like come through the other end of things, and in the beginning, like they're sorry, I think again, these beers are hitting me. I feel like that's my fucking catchphrase.
As they should. That's another reason I do this.
Like, it's awesome to see these guys on like television. Like, I don't know if they've done SNL, but I know they've done all the talk shows and stuff like that. Like, they're really getting noticed. And it's awesome because I can see the influences. I can see where it comes from. Like, there's so much Bad Brains in the arrangements of their songs. And
they just took all these great bands and made them palatable.
I'm happy I'm so happy. Because they are a great band and they deserve all the acclamations that they get. And like,
and Mike, you kind of nailed it on the head there when you said that, because that's exactly what's happening, right? Like they're just taking, and we've kind of mentioned this before too on this show about like taking, we talked about like Bruno Mars and even taking it to Michael Jackson to a new level, right? And that's exactly what Turnstile does, right? Yeah, they take that and then just keep that legend alive almost, right? But not.
Yeah,
there's a fine line between being the same shit, and,
contrived, and like just doing it in a way that is awesome and new.
Yeah, there's a difference there. So it's.
And you go back to, I mean, it happened with grunge too. When you look at the bands that came out of there, even just the big names with the Pearl Jams and the Soundgardens and the Alice in Chains, where they took, I mean, Alice in Chains is more metal than grunge, but in Soundgarden. But when they take these hardcore bands that come through Seattle, because these giant, Aerosmiths and these massive bands at the time, they don't come through Seattle and that area because you're too small. Yeah, exactly. And you take this hardcore influence and then it melds with Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and the whatever you're listening to, Heart, and it blends, and then all of a sudden you've got Pearl Jam, and you've got that. It's the same kind of thing now, where you're taking all these influences from the past 40 years and blending them into something else.
Yeah.
And now you have Turnstile doing, trying new things.
And I'm happy they're in the mainstream. And I'm happy they're in the mainstream. They have one foot in the mainstream and one foot on the solid foundation of hardcore, which is everything we've just talked about, right?
Yeah.
It's really awesome to see.
Yeah, no, it's good to keep it going, because it feels like it's a lot of genres, they die out, or they have people that keep it going that it doesn't seem real, or it doesn't feel as genuine as it used to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like they're just copies of copies of copies.
Yeah, and they just get sick of it, right? So it's neat to see. That's one band that you can say that is kind of taking it to the next generation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Properly.
And there's so many other bands. I mean, just a quick hitter for these. When you look at Converge with Kurt Ballou, and you look at Gallows, and you look at Every Time I Die, and you look at Cancer Bats.
Right. Yeah.
That's still proper. It's still proper hardcore.
It's true.
And it's still, it's still strong even till today. It's unreal.
I was thinking too, man. What do you think about like 68? Would you put 68 in that?
Oh, with 68, I think they're I don't know. It's super unique, but it's very it's hard to get past the Nirvana influence. Like his voice is very Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
I love that it's a two-piece band and it's so stripped down and it's so like right nail on the head, but it's catchy. And looking back to the lead singer of 68, going back to the Chariot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you get into the Chariot at all, it's that next level of hardcore punk with over the top. He can't help it because that's his voice, but over the top Nirvana influence and Kurt Cobain influence. But I can totally see that. It's stripped down. It's two-piece. They're banging it out just like a early 80s hardcore band. I totally see them in the future evolution of, definitely.
Yeah, and they're still putting it out too, so
yeah.
That was another band that I was thinking of when I was listening to this too.
Love it.
Good topic. I don't know who picked it.
Cool,
I don't know
man.
who picked this topic, but it was solid.
I think it's been bubbling and stewing for
Totally.
a while.
Yeah,
So.
collective effort on this one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Good
nice
call.
job, guys.
Hardcore.
Perfect. There's your ending right there.
Cool.
All right, we want you guys to subscribe, share, and review this podcast. Keep it going, keep it strong, because we're having a great time entertaining you guys with B-Sides and Beers podcast.